Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm Javier Proenza, and today my guest is Becky Brown, and you're in Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you ever in the city proper? Where did you go
Yeah.
to school?
Yeah. So I moved here to Buffalo in 2019 to take a teaching job. So I teach full time at the university at Buffalo, which is a state university of New York, large university. And I moved here from New York City, where I actually grew up. So I spent a good portion of my life in New York City before
Oh,
coming
really?
here to Buffalo. Yeah.
Okay, so then you grew up with like all galleries being like really accessible by foot and stuff,
For
right?
sure. And my family was in the arts. So I actually I'm a lucky kid in that I had a lot of access to that growing up. Didn't always love it as a kid, thought it was kind of boring. And then, of course, kind of circled back. And I think the passion that my parents had eventually kind of rubbed off on me.
What
So
were they? What were they in the arts? Like what arts?
yeah, so my dad is a painter.
Okay.
He's not well known, but he is a huge inspiration to me. Still, he's 85, so still we're hoping he'll have his big break at some point. And my mom is a museum curator. So
Oh, okay. So you like it was because sometimes when people say arts, it's like acting or something like that. Like you
no,
were.
it is like right up in there. It's the visual arts. Yeah, no, which is I have like a real intimacy with my parents as far as what we do,
Mm.
and it's made us really close now, into adulthood. But definitely early on, I think they might have encouraged me to take a different path just because they knew that it's a challenging path in a lot of ways, and you want your children to have stability and all these kinds of things that you don't
Yeah.
always have as artists. So but then again, they like that was what we did, was go to museums and galleries and stuff like that. And when I was a little kid, I would like roll my little baby stroller around and like put it in the corner of the gallery and be like, when are we leaving? But then eventually it shifted.
Yeah, that's
So
funny. My mom used to take me a lot to I was born in Washington D.C., so the first year of my life, my mom would take me to the National Gallery and all of that. And
mm,
and it's funny, she took me as an adult and she was like, "Yeah, you used to stand on your Do you know that have you been there to
I
D.C.?"
have not actually. I would
Okay.
like to revisit DC. It's been a minute.
There's a place where it's like underground, kind of
Hmm.
connecting both of the galleries, I think, or
Hmm.
it's some galleries, I forget which ones. But there's like a big fountain, and apparently I used to stand underneath it. It's funny having parents that are like into this stuff, from an
Yeah.
early age. My mom is a ceramicist, but
Oh, amazing.
so then when did you when did you decide? Like, because I mean, it seems
Yeah.
like your parents were pushing you away, and were they very disappointed?
I don't want to say they were disappointed because they're wonderful and they've been super supportive. But I think there was a time in elementary school where I showed like the tiniest aptitude for math, like really small, and they were like, "Let's go to math camp." Like they were like, "Oh my god, this is so exciting." That did not take. So yeah, I mean, I think when I went into college, I kind of went in, not sure what I was going to do. And definitely wanting to do art, and I had done it in high school, and I couldn't get away from it in a way, so I was always sort of doing it, but I wasn't necessarily committed to it as a life path at that point. And
Uh,
yeah, then I was a double major in college in visual arts and English, so that was kind of the other side of my interests. Was
so
I
none
know.
of it was
Oh
pragmatic.
my God, no. That's how hilarious my parents were, is that at one point they were like, "Oh, she's interested in poetry. Like maybe that's could be a good," and I was like, "No, that's even worse. Like that's actually like the one thing that is probably has even less possibility for, financial stability of any kind." So
Yeah.
yeah, I studied poetry, and literature, and visual art, as an undergrad, and still, even when I came out, I wasn't totally sure that it was going to be my life, but I kind of kept up the studio practice, and I actually worked in a little corner of my dad's studio. I was lucky that he had a studio and I could like set up a little desk in there.
Oh, he
And
must have loved that. That's good time,
are you being
bonding time.
sarcastic or?
No, I'm
Yeah,
serious. It's
because it
like,
actually was cool. I mean, I,
yeah.
I felt sort of like I was invading it a little bit, but it's very big. My parents bought a building in Williamsburg in 1984, so they have kind of one of those studios. It's like one of those studios you dream about. Like it's a larger than anything that I or any of my friends have ever had. So he had space for me to like take over a corner, and actually it was really fun. Like we would listen to music together. He's loves jazz, and so there actually was some wonderful bonding that happened in that early time.
No, I was definitely not being sarcastic.
Because you don't know. Like I don't know how. Well, I'm a new parent now myself. My son is almost 2, so we have a long way to go. But even now, I kind of try to set boundaries around the studio. I'm like, no, mostly because he'll come in and like eat everything, so that we're at that stage. But I don't know. It's interesting to think about how that relationship can evolve, but it was great for me. And so then I actually, I went to the Vermont Studio Center when I was, I want to say 24 or something like that. And that was kind of the formative experience where I had an opportunity to just work on my work like 24/7. And
wait, that was before or after school?
That was after college, but before grad school.
Okay.
So that was kind of a factor in deciding like, okay, I want to do this. I'm going to apply for grad school.
Where did you go to undergrad and grad school?
I went to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, which was, a little bit funny because it's right next to RISD, which is a famous art school. But and part of me like thought, they say you can sort of take classes at both, but that was kind of hard to coordinate. So I only did that once, and I mostly studied art at Brown, which actually was great. It was a really open-ended kind of program.
Isn't that an Ivy League school?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Bemoaning the fact. I'm teasing. No, I mean, that's awesome. Well, I mean, I would imagine they have at least an adequate program, right? Like,
yeah, it's great. I mean, although I will say now that I teach art, I mean, my education in art was pretty non-technical, and then a friend of mine reminded me recently, we were talking about, how to teach a beginning painting class and just kind of brainstorming as you do with people who teach. And she reminded me that I might have like kind of placed out of some of the beginning classes and like didn't take like painting one, and which I didn't really remember, but I had maybe I came in with a portfolio of some kind, and in hindsight, I wish I had taken painting one because I might have liked to learn how to do a color wheel and these kinds of things that I've almost circled back to as an adult and a teacher.
You probably appreciated it more circling back to it though, because when you're in those classes, it's like, although painting a color wheel was pretty informative, right? Like, because it does teach you how to gray stuff and whatnot.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of control that you have to work on that is helpful if you've never like lifted up a paintbrush before. As I learn with my students, my beginning students, it's like it's a little scary to like dip an object into something wet and try to put something on the people are very anxious, and sometimes those kinds of exercisey type things I feel like can help you kind of warm up and work your way through the materials without sort of the anxiety of making art, which is could be scary.
Well, I mean, that's what I like right now. I'm just doing all these like patterns on a grid that eventually I'll try to figure out something to do with them. But sometimes it's just good to like work, and you learn stuff from like very boring stuff. Like I'm literally drawing the same pattern just because I want to see it on a sheet of paper, and then I get to work on my cross hatching and stuff like that. And it can be just as fulfilling as painting something that's like actual art, like,
oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's also like, that's kind of why we make anything, is because we have this desire to see it. Like it doesn't exist yet. And we're like, oh, I have to make it. Right.
Yeah. Well, can you talk a little bit about the city? I don't know if you know Nick Neighbor. I mean, I don't know how well worlds overlap. I know you know John O'Connor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He curated you into his show. So I'm always curious about art scenes, but I had a pretty decent breakdown of like the higher end like art gallery rundown from Nick Neighbor. I feel like John felt he was more in tune like in the 90s, How do you feel your relationship? Because I'm starting to realize the more I ask this question, the more it is different for everybody how they
sure.
relate to the scene. So where are you at? You suggested that maybe you were doing like are you in commercial spaces right now? Are you following that
Yeah,
that path?
for sure. Yeah, it's interesting to get a sense of like the scene in New York. It's almost like trying to talk about like world culture or something. It's like it's so big and it's like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many like so and it's again so different than where I am in Buffalo, where it's a very small,
Well, when
small
we
and
met,
loving scene.
well, when
But
we met, you were I was like, oh, you're in New York, and you were like, I'm in Buffalo. You made it very specific, very
some
clear.
people don't know how far away they are, so
How far is that?
Oh, very far. So Buffalo's the westernmost tip of New York State. So it's like about a 7-hour drive from New York City.
Damn, New York is
Yeah,
that big?
it is. It's bigger than even I quite realized when I was looking at
That's
the
like
map.
those are Florida style
Oh yeah,
distances.
it's like hard to do the trip in a day. You can do the trip in a day, but it's like a drag.
Yeah. So you've
Flying
turned your
is
back
really
on New
quick.
York? I'm kidding.
No, no, no. I go there often. My parents are there. I show there, so it's a great place to go back to, and there's so much to see there. And in a way, I've kind of reflected on the fact that when I go, I usually have like a big list of things that I want to see, and I'm very determined about seeing them. Whereas when you actually live there, and I'm sure you find this in LA, like you miss stuff a lot. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh God, that's closed already, like because you're just in your routine, and you don't necessarily get to all the stuff that's there. So
I'd
yeah,
say that's probably even compounded more by the fact that you have to like drive everywhere here, which like
yeah.
because I'm constantly like this past weekend there was something going on. I was like, like I can also just like not be part of it.
Yeah. Oh, and I found myself like feeling that a lot in New York because you're just like,
Yeah,
well, I could go to like this one show in Brooklyn and then try to hustle back to the Lower East Side, and then there's that thing in Chelsea, and then you're just like, forget it. Like I
yeah.
can't even like it's like it's just a lot. And yeah, and it can be overwhelming. So I was actually and being in that environment for my whole life, like I was really hungry for something different and kind of a different pace and just a whole different energy. So Buffalo is definitely that. But
Yeah.
to like answer your question, I definitely wouldn't say that I fully have my finger on the pulse of everything in New York, especially since I've been gone 5 years now. But I'm back and forth quite a bit. And
Well, where were
yeah.
you? What were your big main go tos that you like? What do new like? Okay, over here, I would say the spaces that people really like are that are popular, like Deitch, Jeffrey Deitch. I like Hauser and Wirth when they have a good show. Like they had the Mike Kelly thing recently with the or not recently. It goes to show you how long it's been since I've been to Hauser and Wirth. But that's my point. Like it's a big spot and there are big shows there, but I never really get out there. Where were the spots that people like really, when you were out there were like, okay, this is like you can go there and it's guaranteed you're gonna enjoy the show and maybe you're going there because you're gonna see people that but they are also going there because the show is good, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
that
for
make
sure.
sense?
Do you mean in LA when I was there or in
No,
New York?
no, in New York, New York.
Okay, because I definitely got a lot of like suggestions and tips when I was in LA back in March, and that was
Yeah.
really fun too to kind of jump
How
in.
long were you here?
It was kind of maybe 4 days or so, so
Oh wow.
not really enough time, but I did hit a
Yeah,
fair amount, and it
yeah.
was amazing. I was like,
Did you go to
super.
Hollywood and like go
Okay,
to the
Hollywood.
region?
So I think there was an opening there that I did make it to.
Hmm.
Regan Projects is
Yeah,
that? Yeah. So I'm a
yeah, yeah.
little fuzzy. I think I went to an opening there, and then my friend and I actually took the subway in LA, which I didn't really know was a thing, and that was a fun experience.
Such a New Yorker thing to do when you come to LA.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm really kind of bringing it home here because we didn't have a car, so we were Uber and lifting a lot, and one of our friends had a car, but there was it's not that easy to get around. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and everything is so spread out. So yeah, that's a huge difference. Like in New York, you can go to a neighborhood and go to, like 100 galleries within walking distance. And those neighborhoods shift. Like when I was in grad school, it was, God, I don't quite know when it shifted to the Lower East Side, but I mean, it was Chelsea for a long time. I want to say when I was in my early 20s, sort of coming up. And that was like, you'd go to the openings in Chelsea, and that was really the main place. And then things kind of shifted to the Lower East Side, and that became the main place to go. And things stayed in Chelsea. That's the thing, is like each time there's a shift, like the other one kind of also stays there. So now there's just like, there's more places to go. But and then, the Tribeca shift happened since I've been gone, and that seemed to happen really fast.
So Tribeca wasn't a scene when you were there?
No, I mean, not that I was really aware, and maybe I was out of it, but I mean, I moved in 2019. I want to say that happens like 2020, 2021. I was recently hearing from someone that there's like one realtor there who sort of like gets everyone the spaces. I don't know too much about how that works, but it is sort of, you're like, wow, suddenly all the galleries are here. And, some of them are, they might have multiple spaces, but, it just seems that there was just a massive sort of critical movement in that direction. But there's still a lot of spaces on the Lower East Side. So, you still go there too, and you still go to Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea has almost like more museum quality, like the spaces are huge. And, but it's also amazing because then you're seeing like museum quality work for free. I mean, that's something that, you can think about with the art world is as elitist as it is, like you can go and see a lot of amazing stuff for absolutely free. And, so I mean, I was in Chelsea, I think the last time I was there. I'm trying to think. I saw a Huma Baba show that was great. I saw some work by Loie Hollowell, who was an artist that I had wanted to check out for a while. So there's definitely things on my list that are in Chelsea. But then, there might be, more like younger peers and things like that might be more in the Lower East Side and Tribeca.
So you were never kicking it in Brooklyn? In your time, because I've also heard that that's like where most of the artists live. Again, this is all by other people's experiences, which is as accurate, you can take as accurate as you can. But like, was that something that you're talking more like the commercial spaces that you would go to,
as far as like going to see work in Brooklyn and other boroughs, not as much for me. I mean, there's definitely a ton of galleries in Brooklyn. Actually, before I went to grad school, the Williamsburg scene, what John was talking about, it actually was quite an active and pretty cool scene. It doesn't feel as active to me now, although again, I could be wrong. I'm not. I don't have my finger on the pulse there. But there were a ton of galleries and a ton of artists in Williamsburg, and then Williamsburg just got increasingly unaffordable and corporate, and so most of those galleries kind of either ceased to exist or moved elsewhere. But the main critical masses are really in the Lower East Side, Tribeca, and Chelsea as far as galleries. But there's definitely a handful. I mean, there's spaces out in Ridgewood, which is officially Queens, but it's kind of the farthernmost edge of Brooklyn. So the farthernmost, so there's Williamsburg, and then if you keep going east, it becomes Bushwick, which is probably a neighborhood that you've heard of. That's also kind of where people went from Williamsburg. And then if you keep going east, it becomes Ridgewood, Queens, and that's where there's stuff happening there now.
Does it take 7 hours to drive from one end of a borough to the other?
Believe it or not, it can with the traffic. I'm not kidding. I mean, it actually, I did have a car toward the end of my time living in New York, and it was a blessing and a curse because I lived out in the Bronx pretty far out, and I would be like, okay, I'm going to drive in, and oh my God, it was just insane.
It makes me, that still has blown my mind. That's why I bring it back up. But it's like, I would like to see, how they put Alaska in the US to show you the scale? I'd love to see Florida, because everything, I'm from Florida, so everything is in relation to Florida distances. So I'd love to see that, to see grafted on and see where from the city to where that corresponds to distance wise. I mean, I guess I could just do 7 hours up the I-95, and be like, that puts me not quite at, I don't know. It's been a while.
Well, it's funny because in New York too, I mean, the distances are actually not that long, but there's just such a massive range in the amount of time it can take between whether you're
Oh,
driving or taking the subway. Like, you know, it might be a few miles. You know, this is a distance that if you were anywhere else, you would drive in like 10 minutes or something. But like in New York, that could easily take you an hour and a half, whether you're driving or taking the subway, or taking,
wow.
you know, a combination of subways and buses and stuff. So
That's
it's,
wild.
yeah, I mean, it's just that there's just so many people and so much that it's just hard to move about in an
That's
efficient
crazy.
manner. But I mean, so in a way, that's why it's good that a lot of things are concentrated. So, like, you know,
Yeah.
you can go to a group of openings that are pretty close to each other. And that was something that I found kind of challenging in LA. And I'm curious, you know, to see is
I
that you
mean,
can,
that's an accepted reality of LA. You can't see
yeah.
everything.
Like, and even if you're like in one sort of like cluster, it's still too far to walk, kind of like you can't quite, like, that was what I was finding.
Sometimes,
And so I need
yeah,
to,
yeah.
but keep exploring. I'm very new to it, but it was super exciting to dip my
It's
toe in.
no, it's a great scene. You know, I talk about it quite often, but it is one. I mean, it's I started off in the Miami art scene, and then I came out here. It wasn't that difficult to transition. I think it's much bigger out here and a much more like. I think that in Miami, I had access to higher profile people, but without even really trying. But out here, like everybody's really friendly, you know. Like it was easy to meet like famous artists in Miami, whereas over here, there's just like I don't know if it's a buffer or whatever. It's just like you could wander the art scene and never. There's so much like artist run stuff that you could never even cross paths with the commercial side, and never even like bother going there, and you could still like live an active art life in a community, you know. So that's interesting here, whereas like there was more overlap between like in Miami it was just like a small art community and everybody kind of was in the same boat. So I mean that's not to say that it's not small here too, but like I think I had Matt Stromberg on, and he described it as different art worlds instead of the art world, which I think is a pretty helpful way of thinking about it. But
Yeah, I would say that's really true in New York. Like they're
yeah,
and they don't necessarily even intersect. Like they're kind of like some of them could be these separate portals
yeah,
and you know you might cross between them, like you certainly can, but you're like, wow, these are such different worlds, you know,
yeah.
for sure.
And I definitely see people that have made the crossover to like more commercial stuff still interacting with like artist run spaces. So they're not completely it's not like you go to one and then you completely abandon the other. They're not but I think there's a lot of people that don't even ask the question. They just want to make art, and that's totally valid. You know, they're not necessarily like what are you pursuing career-wise?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question, right? Because there's so many paths, kind of as we were saying with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
different art worlds. There's many different paths to navigate those. I've never been that focused on sales. You know, sure, I mean, it would be great, but I have shown at a lot of nonprofit spaces where you know sales weren't even a thing, and that's always been meaningful. And there can be other kinds of support that can come, you know, from that realm. I was part of a program 10 years ago now. I can't believe it, but at the Drawing Center, which is a wonderful nonprofit in New York in Soho, and they kind of had this not quite a residency. It was more of like there was just a group of artists, and we did shows together and would meet kind of formally and informally, and that was a kind of wonderful opportunity. And you know, it's led to other kinds of connections. So yeah, I mean, things kind of move one step at a time, and like one thing leads to another in a way. I was showing with Good Naked Gallery last year, and sold some work and did my first art fair, which was a new experience. It was so interesting because I mean, I'd been to fairs, I'd been around them, but I hadn't really participated, and kind of saw this other side of this like concentration of people and art, and you know, in this shorter time and smaller space, and it was great in a lot of ways because you know you have a lot of conversations kind of packed in tight, and you know sales are nice, and So yeah, I'm not against that at all. Like I think that people love to hate on art fairs too, in a way, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily do that. And I went when I was in town for Future Fair last spring. I went to the Freeze Art Fair for the first time, which I don't know if it has an LA
I think there's an LA
outcropping.
freeze.
It might,
Yeah.
but I mean, people again like hate on it, but it was kind of amazing. I saw a lot of work
Yeah.
in a fairly short amount of time, and a lot of great work. So I mean, I think I'm pretty open with where opportunities lead. I did a show over the summer in Ithaca, New York, which is a small and lovely kind of town in central New York State. That was an artist-run space with a friend of mine, and who's an artist, and her wife was a composer, and so very kind of DIY, but a lot of fun, a great community. It was great to kind of have my work in a different context and meet some new people there. So so pretty
And
open.
you showed at Last Projects over here. So
that was really fun.
Who curated that show? Ow.
Yeah, so a dear friend of mine, Yola Monacob Stockton, curated the show, and it was sort of a group show, solo show combination where I don't know if you remember, like on the right side were her photographs, and she's a kind of photographer and film and video artist. And then kind of on the left was more of the group show, and there were a lot of thematic convergences, kind of ecological themes and alternative species and environmental issues and things like that. So it was really, really fun. And our other friend, Hanai Udamura, was in the show, and some other wonderful people. So that was cool, and I'm hoping to work with Alona at Last sometime in 2025. So I'm looking forward to coming back.
Nice.
And doing a
That's
solo
cool
show with her.
Oh yeah. Let me know when you come into town.
I will.
What's it called? So okay, can we get a little bit? I noticed that your work is you do stuff with text sometimes.
Yeah.
Is it all? Are you okay? Tell me about your work. How about that? That's an easier way to ask the question.
No, that's great. I mean, it's interesting because when it's been very text based in recent years, it wasn't always that way. I really started out as a collage artist, I would say. I was a collector of all things printed.
Were you big on did you like the Dadaists, the German Dada and
Absolutely.
all of that? Yeah.
Huge influence. Yeah, I love Hannah Hawk, Kurt Schwitters.
Yeah.
That definitely a big influence. Kurt Schwitters made this like whole house, the Merzpau, that I don't know if you've seen it, but check out images. It was destroyed in World War II, but kind of a walking installation, 3D painting kind of whole experience that he built in his home. So I was really, really inspired by a lot of that, and just
that reminds me. Sorry to interrupt. That reminds me of John Hartfield. Also used to like I think he like made his living space kind of a sculptural piece itself.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he was also a collager, but it's funny that that two people were kind of doing the similar thing. He also used to wear his like German military gear and like let it rot and stuff. It was let it deteriorate. It was all very political stuff.
Like it was dirty, like the
like he just like disrespecting the uniform by not maintaining it properly. By not washing it.
Interesting.
But it's funny because. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, you were on a flow. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. All those folks, and it's interesting. Yeah, collage is often used as a kind of protest art form. To some extent. I don't think I was.
You weren't as influenced by the agitprop aspect as not
as much. No, I mean, I didn't have as much specific sort of political agenda as maybe some of those folks, but.
Well, they were fighting Nazis.
Right, exactly. They had good reason. I don't think I have that battle in front of me. Although who knows? Might happen. I think for me it was more just about. I mean, partly in a way about growing up in New York City and being bombarded by stimulation. I mean, New York City is a collage in a lot of ways, right? Like every block is like. This type of store, this other thing, different kinds of people are coming at you every minute, and there's just a lot of information. So I think a lot of my work has always been very dense, very busy, very colorful. And a lot of it is a response to that kind of environment that I was in. But then I guess, and so the approach to text is really still a collage based approach. So even though I'm not doing as much cutting and pasting now, although I still do some, I'm collecting text that I hear around me. So I'm collecting words, phrases. There's a lot of stuff that has to do with social media and the internet that's coming in quite a bit.
How do you keep track of all this stuff, or do you keep
oh
it
gosh.
in like in a notebook, or is it all just floating in your head?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because this past week I was doing kind of a deep clean in my studio. It was like way overdue, and I had like papers just like strewn over the floor. And they're like lists. So I was trying to sort them. Like some are more like imagery inspiration, and then some are lists of words, and some are compositional ideas. So my big challenge was like the ultimate sorting. And I think I have a stack that's kind of like this high, that's like just lists of words and random phrases. So like anytime I'm listening to something, or podcasts, or watching the news, or reading an article, or overhearing a conversation on the street, like I'm kind of jotting things down that I might want to reimagine. And so, yeah, there's a ton of them. My next task, as I'm sort of embarking on some new projects this fall, is going to be really just like combing through all of that, because I also never throw anything out. So, there's like an old crumpled list that I made like years ago that I've probably used most of the material on it, but there's like one little phrase that I haven't. So I keep it, and it's like, it's all like coffee stained and ripped and everything. But
Well, I love that, like, you don't just have like, first of all, one thing your process tells me one thing important is you always have like a random piece of paper near you that you can grab. It sounds like you don't have like a dedicated thing. You're just like, oh.
Yeah, no, it's literally like I'll write it on this table. It has to be within reach. And it actually, and I hate to say, like, well, I don't hate to say, but this is sort of a something I think about in my work. I do use my phone now to take notes too, part of my work is about not wanting to use screen-based communication, but it's inevitable, right? Like the phone is something that is within reach most all of the time. So if I need to write something down, I might not have a piece of paper. Like if I can't find a pencil or something. This is a device that I can record stuff. So I do have like big lists in my phone too. So it's constantly sort of culminating and culling, and yeah.
Not to go off too far, but do you think anyone actually uses their voice memo thing for like voice, like for lists? It's just so much easier to write things down.
See,
anyway,
I've never used that. Yeah, like that's.
Yeah.
I mean, well, there's this strange thing with technology now where we're constantly kind of translating. Like you can speak a text, and you can like write a voicemail. It's like you can listen to your voicemail in written form. You can look at it. Like, it's like, why do we have to keep switching the format of things? Like what? It's just confusing.
Although I will take reading a voicemail over listening to one any day.
Will you? See, no, I've never done that. I'm like, what's the point? I mean, a friend of mine showed me one of my voicemails in written form, and it looked like complete gibberish. Like I was like, what is this? Because it didn't like pick up everything, and then there's ums and pauses, probably all the unfortunate things you'll have to edit out of this podcast. But it really did not. It did not translate to that form. But yeah, I know people hate listening to voicemail, so maybe that's an easier way, but
that is the one thing phones have brought me that I can say without a doubt is amazing to me. But I get it. I mean, it's just it's like do you remember when it was like harder to text? Now we're just going off. It was harder to text someone.
Oh yeah, like you had to press the button like 3 times. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was like, why would anyone do this? Like what? But that's always how I am. I'm like, I mean, when Facebook started, I was in college, and I was like, why would anyone do this? Like, this is so stupid. And then, I'm like, this won't last.
A lot of people have caught onto that, Then it just became like for old people, no?
Well, I guess that's true, but it's just replaced by another. I mean, Instagram, Twitter. These are all the same kinds of things. We just like swap them out. So I thought the whole thing was absurd. I was like, why would anyone want to like communicate through a digital network, like who like when you could just talk in real life. So I'm always like way behind the curve on and usually totally wrong in my predictions. So
I don't know. I mean, it seems like there are health benefits to living like that people are not. It is getting like I remember when it was like scandalous that Google was like you know, giving each person like very specific results based on their like search history and stuff.
That's actually something I want to make a piece about. That's on my list, right? Like I discovered it sort of recently, like that if I Google lobster and you Google lobster, we will get different results. I'm still confused.
But it's like, it's one of those things where like, you hear all this stuff about people, like, you know, people being divided and whatnot. It's like, why don't we just address that? Like,
right. Make Google the same for everyone. Maybe that should be like, be the solution, right? No, it's actually not a bad idea. Like, but I mean, we can't control the tech industry. That's the that's the challenge. Google will never do what we want because it's better for humanity. I mean, that's. So. Well,
they dropped the "don't be evil" thing. Anyway, we're not a tech podcast, so we can go back. So tell me a little. So like thematically, is there you talked a little bit about the New York imagery being bombarded with stuff. Like, what kind of stuff are we talking about with bombarding? Because I can't, unfortunately, I remember some of the pieces, but I can't remember the words in them right now.
No, I know, because there's also always a lot of other information in them. So and I don't know that's I feel like that's more how I originated. I mean, maybe it's still there, but I mean, now that the text, I think my work's gotten a lot like tighter, for better or worse. Like I look at older pieces and I'm like, oh, I was so loose, like maybe. But now the text is a pretty central component most of the time, and a lot of it does have to do with these technological things. So I guess I can use this one behind me as an example. Can you see that it says silent disco? Oh, I'm moving the wrong way. Oh my gosh. Totally not good at this. I guess I can't zoom in on it, but that's okay. But yeah, that was a phrase that I had written down for a long time, because I don't know if you know what a silent disco is or have participated in one.
I don't know. It sounds like a lonely, silent thing, you know?
Right? Doesn't it sound like a nightmare? Well, it's a thing where instead of going to a dance party and listening to music together on speakers, people go and just wear headphones and listen to either the same thing or different things. I think there's different ways of doing it. Either way, I was very struck by the absurdity of taking something wonderful like coming together and dancing to the same song together and turning it into something where we're all isolated in our own worlds, right? And that seems to be very much a theme, right? Like we're together, but we're also separated. I
mean, that's like not to bring one of the most traumatic things that everybody went through in 2020, but like that was the distant together, or what is it?
Social distancing?
Yeah, but there was like a phrase that was like alone together, which makes also makes like is what this sounds like a little bit. Also, I'm gonna ask: it's not like people in there? It's not boomers doing the silent disco.
Oh right? No, it's like young people. Yeah. I mean, maybe there are some boomers doing it. I don't know too much about it, so it is possible. Like we'd have to ask like a teenager if they've ever participated. But I think it's like it's something that young people do for fun. Although I'm like, I think it's something that young people do. No, I think it's a thing. Like, I think it's a thing for different ages and people who go to parties and stuff, which, I don't do much these days at all. But, I mean, so that's kind of one example. I'm looking,
Not to dig too deep into it, but it also feels like people trying to have fun in a repressive system, like where they're trying to not make any noise, not disturb people. I don't know.
Right. Which I think is part of the, one of the selling points is like you can have a dance party and also be respectful of neighbors, which I get that. And I'm all about respecting neighbors, but like we've had dance parties for a long time in all kinds of venues. And I think people have been okay. And, you can have that in the club that has soundproof, like, the joy of a dance party is like being together with people and not locked into your own private world. So it just seems like such an absurdity.
Although I just got the image of people like trying to communicate and still having to yell, but like there's no music, so it's just people with headphones yelling at each other.
Yeah, and making like weird gestures or something. I don't know, which I guess is a little bit like being at a club anyway, right? Because music is loud. And so I don't know. I just, I kind of try to pull on some of these social media era, concepts and phrases that strike me as kind of absurd, and then be playful about them. So like the painting, okay, I got it right. The painting is like a pretty wild pattern. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but it's pretty abstract, but there's just like a lot going on. And then the font is a font that I found in I think it's 80s or 70s era kind of book that someone gave me. So in a way, yeah, I'm still collaging, right? Because I'm still collecting old stuff. But so the font is sort of from the 70s, prime kind of disco era. And I also just thought it was it was a cool font that would have a lot of kind of fun visual aspects. So like increasingly I'm really into just pattern and almost like visual overload and kind of just really obsessive visual patterns that can themselves maybe act as a kind of interference to our screen-based submission, if that makes any sense. But yeah, just kind of like, wow, this is a lot of wild and irregular visuals, and that's so different than the kind of regimented life of the screen that we're used to.
Well, and also I patterns just traditionally have like a really interesting place in, it's textiles. You see it come up in textiles, and I think that there are like traditional, like the chevron, all these little like details that keep reappearing, and it would be interesting to kind of get into the history of that. I've also been drawing a lot of patterns. I'll show you when we're done. But what's it called when the recordings are uploading to StreamYard and we have to awkwardly sit.
That part of this process. Good to know. Okay.
But yeah, no, I there is something, and visually, I think patterns and repetition and rhythm are something that kind of definitely. Like it's hard to imagine that ever going out of relevance, or style, like it's like it's part like having a repeating pattern, like one of the first things that they did with the internet was make it so you could tile stuff into a background to save space and stuff. So I really I like what there's an intuitive thing that happens when you see a pattern that is it's a little bit different than like it lives in a conceptual realm, obviously, because of the constructs of like pattern history and whatnot. I think you'll still see some like really old patterns that have like offensive symbols like swastikas on them that predate predate the Third Reich, and
of course.
It's
These
an interest
have a longer life, right?
But it's also interesting for that one in particular. Like now that symbol that has a historic thing is just completely, and it's a pattern based symbol, right? Which I find really interesting.
Like they're flexible in a way, right? They can be
flexible,
adapted to different kinds of meanings and traditions.
But I would imagine that they picked, it's in, I think also in Japan, it's a symbol for temples. So like you like people will go there and be shocked that there's all these like swastikas on their map, and they're like leading the way to that.
Oh my God. Yeah. I have not had that experience. That sounds very jarring.
Yeah. I mean, I've only seen it on TikTok, but what's it called? So you test the validity based on that, but it's interesting. Like even just them, I hate like that we're in this space talking about these people, but we did talk about the German Dada, so I think it's fitting. But like how powerful that little like emblem, that repeating, that emblem from that they took it, that takes on this whole new meaning, right? Like symbology and all of that. Anyway, because I just find those little details really interesting. In terms of patterns, like there are something that's kind of overlooked, and we maybe take like think of it as wallpaper and stuff like that.
Well, it's abstract essentially, right? Like these are abstract shapes that are geometric or come together in different ways, and then they take on meaning, they take on associations that some are very powerful and they'll never never be rid of them, and then others will kind of keep evolving and growing and changing in the culture. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, a big interest is also that language itself is a kind of pattern, right? Like we have a set of symbols that we reassemble in different ways to mean things, and what are the kind of limits of meaning there, right? Like how can that can become more of an abstract pattern? Can letter forms become abstract? Like to what do we need to make them legible, right? Like how does legibility kind of slow down when language itself becomes a pattern? So kind of language and abstraction and all of those kinds of things, all kind of attempts to almost slow things down and rematerialize our relationship with language, I guess, in a lot of ways. Because, from what we're talking about, so much of our communication is screen-based and text-based, and a lot of even our personal communication where, we're typing little things, right? And it's so not individualized, right? When we used to do everything by hand, there were these kind of individual personal details, like the handwritten notes that I used to exchange with friends in high school, right? I don't know if you did that. There'd be like little details on the letters, and I knew all my friends' handwriting, right? That's definitely something that is not true now, and I'm sure definitely not true for young people and not true for me. So yeah, kind of trying to repersonalize communication and reclaim it in a way.
You just reminded me, like, I moved when I was 12 to the US, and I had a girlfriend in Italy, whatever. I was like 12, so it was whatever kind of
it was a serious relationship, I understand.
Yeah, so eventually she wrote me a letter breaking up with me, saying that she had met a new guy, and then I burnt the letter. And like,
what a ritual, right?
Yeah, the idea of just deleting it now just seems inappropriate,
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. No, but that was, I mean, this was something like I think in a way, because it was a physical object that she had touched and then sent to you, could sort of take charge of that by, exterminating it, right? And that was a powerful thing. Yeah, like you can't really do that with virtual communication, and it never really goes away, right?
That's what's terrifying about it. Yeah,
right. I mean, I will sometimes like be searching for something in my email, and I'm finding like correspondence from years ago. I'm like, why do I have that? I mean, I guess I could cull through and try to do some like digital maintenance, but who does that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people.
Do you ever, like when you're working with these words, do you ever do the thing where you repeat the same word so much in your head that it ends up losing meaning? Is that
all the time? Okay. So much of my work is about repetition. I mean, the other piece that's behind me repeats the words style and substance over and over. And I guess there's something else on the wall, but I could just bring it over, or no?
Well, you can talk about it because most people are going to listen to this anyway.
Oh, right. My
retention numbers at this stage of the interview are not that high.
I listened to quite a few full shows. They were good. I listened to podcasts
on YouTube. I mean,
I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to watch, but I like to listen. So
yeah. Well, thank you for listeing. I didn't want that to go unappreciated.
Oh no, it's great to listen. Yeah, it's really cool. But no, I repeat all the time. That's a big part of what I will do with a word, because it's almost like, I think what you just said, almost like experimenting with when does it lose meaning, like that line between sort of emphasis and, nonsense, right? Like where does that lie? And then how does, like, as you said, when you say a word over and over and over, it becomes abstract, right? Cat, cat. And can the same thing happen when you paint it over and over? So the words behind me, I was experimenting with style and substance, which are not explicitly related to the internet, but it was just I've done a lot of work with kind of words that are like opposites, but also seem inextricably linked in some ways, which is maybe most opposites. Shame and pride were two of the first ones that I worked with, just kind of realizing, they're exact opposites, but somehow one is always like on the heels of the other, right? Like if you're experiencing one, the other is maybe close behind in some way. And style and substance seemed like one of those. And we were hearing it quite a bit, I felt like, in the lead up to, God, I want to say it was the debate in which Biden didn't perform well. And there was a lot of talk about like, well, should we pay attention to the style or the substance of the debate, right? The sort of impossibility of extracting them, right? Because how do you know, like that, you couldn't even focus on substance because the style was not functioning, right? So I mean, so I just became interested in those two words, right, and how they are codependent, but also people try to distinguish them. So I wanted to just basically paint them over and over onto a striped background, and I used these two fonts, one of the silent disco font, and then this other kind of Art Deco style font, and I kind of like merged them together as I went down. So like the two at the very bottom are like this sort of hybrid fonts that sort of combines the two, which wasn't even an idea that I had when I set out. Like I was just going to kind of repeat the words as I went. And then that became this sort of like perfect solution in a way. Like I often start a work with, kind of a set of rules or an idea of what I want to do, but there's a lot that happens in the process, and that's the fun part.
Yeah. The discovery.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I really appreciate your insights into. I just kind of want to tell you what my word was when I first discovered that trick about words becoming abstract.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
When I was a kid, this was before I even like knew what pot was or anything like that. I was just entertaining myself with my brain, and I just said drawer until.
It's a funny word, right?
It's such a weird word.
Yeah.
And I just kept going drawer, and to the point where I still am suspicious of that word.
Yeah. No, I mean, because it's drawer, right?
Yeah.
Like it's also someone who does what we do, right? I mean, it's like this funny combination. Yeah, like I feel like my mom would always just say draw instead of drawer. Like there's different ways of pronouncing it. Yeah, and it's, again, even as we're saying it now, it's completely collapsing, like the meaning of it, as we've repeated it a few times. So yeah, there's this kind of magical thing that happens in that process.
It's always on the edge for me. If I say it enough times, it's gone. But yeah, there's also a lot of interesting things. I mean, not to get just to throw something random in at the end, but like I think that something about technology makes it hard for me to remember that we're biological beings a lot of times. So like
that's a great way of putting it.
Like when you're physically attracted to somebody, right? Like that can be a mind fuck sometimes, in the same way that the drawer thing is, where it's like you're into someone's being and you don't really know where that being is, right? And I think that like something about technology separates mentality from the physicalness of things. In terms of how we perceive people. I interact with a lot of people mostly through Instagram, right? Where I'm seeing their edit of what they are like, which I do as well. I'm not, it's the game that we're playing, right?
Yeah. None of us are exempt from that.
But that something in that process kind of makes a separation for me between people's minds and people's, and then it gets even weirder when you start seeing people's politics and like, and I'm not going to say I'm not going to like single out anybody, but like there's the humanity of a person. And when you interact with like, I'm from Florida, so I know a lot of good old boys.
Right. I was going to say I'm from New York, so I kind of don't, but
it's like, they're fine. They're just human beings that disagree with you. But it's become this like hyperbolic thing in the world where like, where it's like, I don't know. I just feel like the dehumanizing element of social media is a pretty intense thing that I'm kind of becoming more and more aware of. And then
100%.
And then as I like, one of the things that's been crazy is that like as I do the show more, like people start to respect me more in a way that I've never had before professionally, and that's a mind fuck. And it is
thing though. I mean,
it's a good thing. It's a good thing, but it also talks about the distance between how I perceive myself and like like it surprises me that people are like, oh hey, because as far as I know, this show is tiny, but people, you know what I mean? Like,
But yeah,
so,
but you're getting out in the world, right? And you're more visible in a sense, right?
I'm more visible, and people are like nicer to me up front. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's so, but the consumption of the podcast that makes that possible is so removed from the process of making it that like, I realize that I'm putting myself out there, but I'm not for example, I was dating a woman and she had listened to like 30 plus episodes of the show.
Before you started dating?
No, like she kind of binged as we were dating.
That makes sense. I would too.
Yeah, and then we were hanging out, and one day she was like, "Is this the real you? Like all goofy and silly?" And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't realize I wasn't putting that in the show, you know." So like, because especially the more that I do it, the more I try to stay out of the way. Even though I interrupted you a few times to.
No.
But you get what I'm
did
saying?
she feel that you were different, like on camera or on air than?
No,
Or?
she just surprised me. What surprised me was the idea that there was something about me that she didn't know, that she couldn't get from me from just listening to the podcast.
I see. Okay.
Which is like, because the podcast is pretty intimate. I'm having a conversation,
Yeah.
but I'm not being cutesy and goofy. I'm not serenading.
You're being a little cutesy and goofy.
Anyway, but my point is that like just doing this is really an interesting way to sort of like, like my whole self-image has had to change to keep up with how people because like I'm like everybody else. I hate myself, or I mean, not everybody hates themselves, but like I spend a lot of time thinking about what a piece of shit I am. Like I think a good majority of people do, right?
For sure.
And then when you have that discrepancy, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not so bad, But anyway, maybe I've revealed too much about myself.
And that's I think you're touching on really the nuance and the complexity of it, right? Like we can find affirmation and community and validation. Like there's a lot of good things. Like, and I that's something that I grapple with. Like I don't want to ban all of it entirely, although part of me kind of does. But I think obviously there's a lot of good things that have come out of it, different kinds of connection. Obviously the fact that we can do this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but at what cost, I guess, right? Like those sort of alienating qualities that you were talking about, like alienation from your physical body, and then almost like a kind of identity confusion, right? Like which is the real you or something, right? I think that's such a confusing one too, right? Especially with social media when people are constantly kind of branding, right? And
No, I mean, I'm constantly, and then the more I interact with social media, the more I make an effort to use it only as a marketing branding tool.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do too, because I don't using it for personal things just feels a little strange to me, but then again, some people it works for them. So
yeah. But anyway, well, thank you so much. I mean, we could probably keep going for a while, but I'd rather just have you back on and maybe we can talk about some internet scandal.
Yeah, totally. This was really fun.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I definitely.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been great. It was really nice to meet you at Last Projects.
Yeah.
And I enjoy what you're doing. So we'll definitely be in touch. Can I promote anything for you? What's your Instagram?
Yeah, it's at Becky BRWN. So it's like Brown without the O. It's a common name, so that is my email and Instagram.
Is that how you actually spell it?
No, it has an O.
Okay.
It has an O in real life.
I'm just checking for when I release the episode.
No, it's BROWN, but on Instagram it's missing an O, which creates all kinds of confusion. More with my email address. And I'm in a group show in Cape Cod right now called Trouble in Paradise. Cape Cod, I don't know if you've been there. It's a lovely little corner of Massachusetts on the ocean. There's an artist residency there that I've done for the past few years, and there's a new gallery space kind of showing artists from the residency. So, Ready Made Gallery, I should say, is the name. Cool. And looking out to hopefully coming out to LA in 2025 at some point.
Sure. No, definitely. LA welcomes you as its ambassador.
Oh, thank you. No, I can't wait. I feel like I only scratched the surface, and I've definitely had California fantasies for a long time. So
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great place. I really like it. It's one of those things where like, it's like New York. It's a hard city.
Yeah.
It beats you down a little bit, but where else would you live?
Right,
Like,
right, right.
so I mean, I guess you could live in Buffalo.
You could.
Yeah.
Not
seven
many people
hours
do,
away.
but
7 hours away. Are
yeah.
you a snob about wings now that you
Oh
live
gosh,
there?
no. I mean, I like them, but I'm not, there's all kinds of like controversies in Buffalo about different kinds of like spices and toppings. Like
Yeah.
blue cheese is controversial, or
It's
maybe
I
it's
mean
ranch. I can't
ranch,
remember.
ranch. I'm
So
with him on
you're
that
more up
contra.
on this than I am. Okay, because I don't know. I mean, I like wings and I've enjoyed some good wings here, but I cannot say that I come down strong.
Ranch is a crime against humanity.
Is that what it is? Okay, so blue cheese is what you're supposed to have? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
I
I'm
mean,
sorry. I like ranch. What am
I
I?
know.
Call me crazy.
I like ranch on other stuff, but it's blue cheese for like for me. Wings are, and I was so proud of myself for not bringing up buffalo wings to someone from Buffalo, and now I've just realized that I fucked all that up at the end. But yeah, wings have always been an excuse to eat blue cheese dressing.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, you
And
got to
so,
come out to Buffalo since I'm
oh,
seeing you
dude,
have a passion here. Have you been to
yeah.
Buffalo?
No, I've only been to New York like a handful of times, like, or actually not even, maybe like I've been to the TWA terminal, which is now that beautiful hotel, and I still have memories of that. Like, it's one of the most amazing things in New York. And I would travel going to Italy, and that was my connecting flight at the Trans World Airlines. But yeah, I think I've only been to New York like proper itself twice.
Well, New
So
York City and Buffalo, those could be separate trips because Buffalo, as I
yeah, yeah.
said, far away. But Buffalo is a great art town to visit. We have a new, it's not new, but a great art museum called the Buffalo AKG Museum. It just reopened after a big renovation, and it's awesome. So it has a great collection and contemporary shows, and there's a small but supportive community here of really wonderful artists. Yola, who curated the show in LA, I met here. She lives in Hawaii now, but she and our other friend were all Buffalo artist buddies. So it's a good place. So come through.
Cool, cool. I definitely. I mean, and the better this show does, the more I plan on expanding outside of LA. So
Yeah, yeah.
that sounds very doable. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate if you've made it this far on YouTube. That's even better. Give us a like and a subscribe. Comment whatever you want to comment. Down below, give us 5 stars wherever you listen, and we have stickers. I'll
Ooh.
probably have some way of buying them. They're released, I guess this September 14th has happened by this time. So they're out and they'll be available for order. So got stickers, t-shirts, and yeah, if you want to help us out, any of those things are very helpful. So thank you so much. And we'll be back next week with another guest and another topic that may or may not be art related.